Now we're going to look at the importance of labeling your framework. This is extremely important if you want to work efficiently. This gives you the option of understanding where you are routing all of your signals that make sense to your workflow or the session in hand. As you can see from this session, I've got 3 tracks set up. I've got an audio track labeled kick, I've got an auxiliary track labeled drum bus, and another auxiliary track labeled EMT 140. This is going to be a demonstration just to show how you can easily rename your tracks and your routing structure in the background. So let's start. Our kick drum here, for instance, has many other parts around the drums, but we want to send this to a drum bus. I've got a track, an auxiliary track here labeled drum bus that was made previously, but nothing's being sent to it. I can come to my kick drum track, go to my outputs, and instead of sending it to a specific hardware output, I can send it to a bus. We have a row of numbers here from bus 1 all the way up to bus 24. You can make more of these later, which I will show you. Let's just pick bus 1 and 2. So now our kick is going out to bus 1 and 2. In order for us to be able to monitor and further process, we need to set up an auxiliary bus that takes bus 1 and 2. This would be here. So auxiliary track here, we just need to make this input bus 1 and 2. Now our kick drum is going to go out 1 and 2, which will feed our auxiliary track drum bus. This is okay for now. However, if we start to make more and more tracks and have more and more output buses, bus 1 and 2 might not make sense to us. We might forget what bus 1 and 2 is for. To do this, we can just simply right click on the bus number or control click and rename our bus. If I now rename this drum B and press OK, you will see our kick is now outputted to drum B, but our drum bus, the input, is made that. This now makes it so much easier to understand where we are sending certain sounds. If I go to the bus again, you'll see it's labelled so in our selection list. Let's do the same sort of thing, but instead of on output buses, let's look at effect sends. As you can see here, I've set up another auxiliary track. I've labelled EMT 140. This is where we would, for instance, put our EMT 140 reverb, but we have no input set. I'm going to label this as input 9 and 10. I can now come up to my sends and send it to 9 and 10. As you can see in Pro Tools, it highlights this in yellow, meaning that we have a bus that is already allocated. We'll call this 9 and 10. But just like the output buses, I might forget what 9 and 10 is for. We can right click on this, rename it, and call this one EMT 140. You can see it's corresponded further down as the input of this track. But now on my kick drum, instead of it just saying bus 9 and 10, I know I'm sending to a specific effect. This could be a compressor, of which I would label what the compressor would be. This could be a delay. Again, I would just rename it whatever the compressor or the delay plugin would be. This will now correspond, if I come up to my settings menu, up to setup, I/O. This will now correspond in my buses. You can see here, drum bus has been relabeled as 1 and 2, 9 and 10 is relabeled as the EMT 140. This is where I can do batch labeling. So for instance, drum bus as 1 and 2. If I want to make 3 and 4 always my bass bus, I can label that here. Same with a vox bus or a vocal bus, and then possibly an instruments bus. I could then have an EMT 140. I could then have a parallel compressor, say an 1176. I could then have on bus 13 and 14 a specific delay, let's say the Echo Boy, and so on and so on. Meaning once I press OK, this will save that framework in the background. So let's, for instance, set up a new delay send. So we'll open up one stereo auxiliary input. We'll call this Echo Boy. On here, I can now go to my buses and pick Echo Boy, as I've already relabeled it in my I/O settings. Now I can come up to my kick drum and send it to the Echo Boy instead of bus 1314, for instance. Hopefully you can see now how important it is to label your framework in the background. Not just labeling the tracks, but labeling their routing structure, understanding where things are sent to, understanding what is being taken in, and what those names correspond to. It's always a really good practice to label the bus the same as the track when you're dealing with outputs and dealing with sends. This is because when you come to a mixer, at the bottom here, the tracks will correspond to where things are being sent to. Little things like this are the things that are going to help you work efficiently, keep consistency, and understand exactly what it is you're doing even before you've done it.